Hey guys, Mike Hunsucker here with Heartland Bowhunter, and we're out here at Garmin Ground Zero, and we're introducing the new Xero A1i Pro. We're super excited about this sight. Obviously, we've been shooting the A1i for several seasons now, and they've made some major updates to the sight and some big improvements, so we're going to be going through some of those today as we set it up. So starting off, we're going to walk through some of the key physical features that are different on this Bowsight. I've obviously got it attached to my bow already, just standard screws to the riser hole. But one thing that I'm really excited about is the dovetail attachment. So you're able to actually remove the sight easily for travel. If you want to, if it doesn't fit in your bow case, or you want to take it off or switch bows, you can pop it off really easily. I have the trigger mounted, of course, already right here, but it has a new feature. It's a quick detach where you can just unplug the trigger simply from the Bowsight, quick and easy. One screw come out and you can take the Bowsight right off your bow. One of the things that I'm most excited about on this sight is the micro adjustability. It has 4 different knobs for adjusting the windage, the elevation, and the pitch and the yaw. So when it comes to setting the reticle, you can get everything dialed in perfect. And when you come to set up a Bowsight, being precise and having that adjustability to be able to really dial it in is a huge key. Beyond that, you can also adjust the second axis. So you can adjust the roll, whether if you're off a little bit left and right at those super long ranges, you can get it dialed in perfectly and have it shooting bullets out to however far you want to shoot. All right, we're going to dive into the setup process. That's one thing that is super nice and super easy about this sight having a screen on it, is it tells you exactly what to do, walks you through everything. You don't have to go through the manual and study and read the manual. Obviously, this is an incredible piece of technology and it has a lot of capabilities. And the fact that you can really understand it easily and you can set it up super simply is a huge advantage. The first thing, if you can't get this right, then you may need to rethink buying the sight, but you got to select your language. English for me, and yards or meters, I'm going with yards. And then it's going to ask you if you want to start the pin calibration. We're going to say yes, of course. And it'll ask you to set your draw length. And this sight, the more information that you can give it, the better information it's going to give you back. And so I would highly recommend, obviously, setting the draw length. Pretty much everybody knows what their draw length is, based on your cam or your mod, how it's set. I'm 29, so I'm going to set it to 29. The next question is going to ask you about the arrow speed. And I know my arrow speed, I shot through a chrono. It's 279 with my hunting arrow setup. This arrow speed, I'm going to enter it now at 279. And when I go to set it up, this is a new feature on the A1i Pro that will make the setup process so fast and so seamless. So I got my speed 279, and then it's going to ask you to select your ranged pin color. So when you range a target and it gives you a single pin, it can be red or green depending on your preference. I'm going to go with red, and then it'll ask you to adjust your brightness. So it has a sensor in the sight where it'll automatically adjust the brightness based on the ambient light, but you can manually adjust it as well. I just leave it at the default position starting out, and you can always go back to your settings and change that later. So now we're going to start the 20-yard pin process. Position the 20-yard pin and step 1 of 5 and hit start. So now is where you select exactly where you want your 20-yard pin to be inside of the sight housing. So you can have it higher up towards the top if you want to be able to maximize your distance, or you can have it down lower if you want a larger field of view and you want to be able to have less viewing obstruction. So one nice feature about this new sight is XD mode, which stands for extreme distance. So say you want to have your 20-yard pin lower in the sight window so you have a larger field of view, you can do that without sacrificing too much distance down the line. And so you can always set it up to where you can have 20, 30, 40, and 50 maybe in your sight housing, but then if you want to shoot 60, 70, 80, and further for practice in the summer, whatever, you can always switch to XD mode at that time. So I actually personally kind of like my 20-yard pin about in the default position. If you get it too high up, I'm not a big fan of that. I mean, bow hunting, most of my shots for whitetail are 20, 30, 40 yards. And so I'm not too concerned about getting a ton of distance out of it. This bow, like I said, is shooting 279 feet per second. So it's a decent speed to where, I'll still be able to get good range. So I'm gonna leave it in the default position. And now we're gonna start the on-target alignment process. So now we're gonna make sure the sight is on target. We're gonna start this process and just make sure we don't sail one over the over the target. So step 2 of 5, we're going to hit OK to start. And it just tells you this step roughly adjusts the mount to get on target. Stand 10 large steps from the target and take a shot. So here we go. Okay, so you can see my first shot out of the bow, really close, but probably about 2 inches right. So it asks you now, do you need to make an adjustment? And you say yes. And it tells you to use the W and E to adjust the mount. So the windage is your left and right. The E is your elevation. I look pretty good up and down. So all I need to do is loosen this set screw here and adjust a little bit to the right. You want to chase your arrow. So if you miss to the right, you want to move the sight to the right. This is where the micro adjust comes in. Super handy. It even tells you on the knob right and left, which is nice because sometimes you gotta go left and right to guess. But I'm just gonna do a couple clicks, probably 4 clicks to the right, and then cinch it back down and shoot again. All right, so now that we're good at 10 yards, we're gonna tell it, it says make an adjustment. We said no, we're done. And now we're gonna calibrate the 20-yard pin. So we're gonna hit start on step 3 of 5, and we're gonna stand approximately 20 yards from the target. So I'm gonna move it down a little further, get a range, and we'll go from there. All right, now we got the target backed off to about 20 yards, and we're gonna stand at the desired range for our first pin here. And we're gonna range the target. And we're at 21 yards, and it asks you if you want to use that range. It doesn't have to be 20 exactly, as long as you're somewhere close. So we're going to say yes. And it says go ahead and take a shot to see where we're at. Looks pretty close, maybe just a little bit low and left. So we're going to hit OK here, and it's going to ask you if you hit the bullseye. If you did, that was probably blind luck, but you should be somewhere close. So we're going to say no, we missed, and then it's going to tell you again to use the windage and elevation knobs to adjust. And this is where the micro tunability comes in huge. It'll actually tell you if you hit OK, the next step, it says 1 inch is 15 clicks. So I know that I'm like an inch left and an inch low, so I should have to go 15 clicks both directions, and we'll be really close. There's the windage adjustment and the elevation adjustment. We're going to go down 15. Take another shot and make sure we're good. All right, that looks pretty dang good. I like to shoot a couple arrows just to make sure. This process is a stage that you want to get your 20 dialed in perfectly, because everything else is going to be based off this position of the pin. So don't be afraid to take a few shots. It asks you if you hit the bullseye. You can leave that on the screen and just knock another arrow and send it downrange. That's pretty good. So at this point, we're ready to move on to the next step. Hit yes. So now we're going to align the reticle, and this is a process that is very important. You want to make sure you get it as dialed in as possible. It's ensuring that what you're ranging and what you're seeing is what the sight is actually ranging, and so you want to make sure this is spot on. It's also kind of a form checker. You know, if once you get this set, you want to make sure your form and everything is good. Your grip is the same. But down the road, if you pick up a bow and you're not, gripping it the same way, if you're torquing it at all, it will let you know, because the reticle won't be aligned. So it tells you this step aligns your eye to the laser aiming reticle. At full draw, the pin should be centered in the reticle. So there's a circle and then there's a dot, and you want the pin inside that circle. If you're outside, there's arrows pointing towards the circle to where tell you which direction to go to find that. It will actually show you, if you look on the screen here, it looks like the pin's low and right. That's not where you want it, and then it shows you a good example of what it looks like. This is where the other two micro adjust knobs come into play. There's the RAH, which is the reticle alignment horizontal, and the RAV, reticle alignment vertical. So that is the pitch and yaw of the sight, and you adjust that to get your line of sight in line and get the pin inside the reticle. And it tells you it's actually almost, it's exactly opposite of what you don't, you know, when you're sighting in for 20 yards, you're chasing your pin. With this, if you need to move up and right, or up and left if your pin is low and right. So it's the opposite of that. So we're going to go ahead and draw back. It'll ask you if your reticle's aligned at full draw, and you want to just check that. So it looks like mine is just a little bit low and to the right. And so I'm going to move up and to the left. So you just grab your Allen wrench. Just like the other micro adjust knobs, you just loosen this here and make a few clicks one direction or the other. I'm going to go up and to the left. The RAV is towards the back of the sight housing here. Just a few clicks there, and we should be good. Like I said, don't be afraid to do this multiple times because you want to get it as dialed as possible. That is pretty good right there. So we're going to say done. The reticle is aligned now at full draw, and now we're going to move on to calibrating the pin stack. Start the process. It'll ask you if you want to auto calibrate using your arrow speed, which this is where it comes into play, having that arrow speed. You can say yes or no. We're going to say yes. And then it's going to ask you if you want to measure and set your sight height and length. And like I said earlier, you know, this is a process where you can give the sight more information. Super simple to do, so that's what we're going to do here now. We're going to say yes. And it tells you measure the length between the sight ring and the grip throat, which is this yellow ring around the outside here, and the grip throat. So you say okay, and then it actually shows you a little bit of a picture, but basically from that yellow ring to the center of your grip, and for me, it's right at about 5.5 inches. So I'm going to hit OK, and grip to sight, 5.5 inches. And then it's going to ask you to measure the height between the sight and a nocked arrow. So you hit OK, it shows you a picture here. And that's going to be this distance right here, which is not quite 1.5 inches. So we're going to say it was just shy of 1.5 inches. And then it's going to ask you to select your arrow diameter. I'm shooting a micro diameter arrow, so I'm going to say micro. And now it's going to ask you to validate the pin stack for best results. This requires a 40-yard shot. So now this sight has all the information that I've given it, and it's going to basically give me the distances for these longer ranges. So we're going to move the target back even further, beyond 40 yards, and it says to go to the farthest range you're comfortable at shooting. The further away, obviously, you know, your arrow is going to have more drop. You're going to have more left and right travel. So the further away, the more dialed in you're going to get. So let's go move this target. So now that we got the target moved down range, we're going to range it and see how far. It doesn't really matter, like I said, as long as it's past 40. And we're at 48 yards. It's going to ask us if you want to use that range. We're going to say yes. So now it's going to give you the pin for 48 yards, and we're going to shoot a group of arrows it even suggests, which is what I always suggest as well, just to make sure and see how close we are. Looks pretty good. Let's just shoot a few and we'll take a look and see. All right, so we're pretty comfortable with the results down there. We're gonna say yes, the arrow hit the bullseye. And then it's gonna ask you if you want to enable the dynamic level. You can say no or standard or pro. And we're gonna go with the pro. And what the dynamic level does is it has 2 dots above and 2 below of your actual pin, and it will tell you if you're canting the bow left or right. So the top will blink if you're canting to the right, and the bottom will blink if you're canting to the left. The pro mode's a little more sensitive than the standard mode, so it's really up to you, but all in all, it just helps you, be more accurate, and you don't have to take your eye off of your pin to look down at your level, to look back up at your pin. It's just right there, right in the field of view. And that is gonna complete the setup process. All right, so now that we've completed the setup process, it's gonna give you your fixed pins. It gives me 20 through 80, which is my maximum distance. And it's pretty cool. They actually alternate colors. You can customize them to however you want, but they're in 10-yard increments from 20 all the way out to 80 yards. A couple other really cool features of this site. The ability to store multiple arrow profiles is something that I use quite a bit. I like to have a lighter, flatter flying arrow for turkey hunting where, every inch matters. But I want a bigger, heavier arrow for big game. And so you can set up multiple profiles in this site and switch between them seamlessly. So you don't have to resight in your bow, completely do everything differently. You just literally set up both profiles and you can switch back and forth. One new feature of this site is the new apex mode, the flight apex mode. And what it does is gives you the apex of your arrow flight. So if you're hunting in the timber and you have a limb or an obstruction between you and your target, it will show you the peak flight of your arrow so you know exactly how that arrow is going to fly and if it's going to clear. Beyond that, we have the XD mode, which I just talked about, my maximum distance being 80 yards. I like to shoot longer range. I like to, especially in the summertime, get out and practice. You practice at long range. When you come into 30, 40 yards, it makes it super seamless and easy. We're gonna go through that process right now and set it up. So you go into your settings and you go to your pro settings, and XD mode is off by default. It tells you XD mode allows an additional mount position to be set. Using a lower mount position increases the max range. Shorter pins may be unavailable at the lower position. So when you do lower the sight, you're likely going to lose your 20 and 30. You may keep some of your other pins as well though. You start by entering the current position on the elevation rail. Then you lower the mount and record the new position, and the pins are updated automatically for the current position. The sight will display the needed position after each range. Enable XD mode, we're going to say yes, and it wants us to set the base position of the mount. Hit OK, and it pops up by default 30. So what you want to do is look at your mount here and see how many tick marks I'm down. I'm at 31, 2, 3. So I'm going to set my base position at 33. So that's when you know where to move back to get to your standard position. And then you want to set the extended position of the mount. It says make sure that the arrow can clear the sight of the body. So what you want to do, you want to make sure the arrow will clear the sight body. Obviously, you only have so much distance here. When we measured earlier, we were 1.5 inches. And so you don't want to lower it so far to where your fletchings will be contacting the sight. So you hit OK. And then we're going to go ahead and set our extended position. So all you need to do is loosen the set screw and then dial down to the lower position. We're going to go down to 45. That ought to get us out there pretty good distance. So 45 is my position that I'm going to go with. I'm going to go ahead and lock it in here and then set the extended position to 45 on the sight. XD setup complete. The mount is in the extended position. So when you're in XD mode, it actually will make your reticle unaligned because you had to move the sight housing down. So when you do range in XD mode, you need to range at rest. And it's really similar to when you were setting up the reticle. You just need to align the dot inside the circle, and if you're outside, the arrows kind of point you in the right direction. But I like to just lean the bowstring up against the bill of my hat, and it's pretty steady. And I got 47 yards, which is where the target was previously when I was validating the sight. But now, even in the XD mode, I can still shoot my 47-yard pin, which is nice. So now we're going to go and just see just how far we can get. If you tap the fixed pins here, they've automatically updated, and I can actually shoot 30 still, and I can shoot all the way out to 90. So I probably have a little more travel in the sight if I wanted to try to get to 100, but just that one adjustment from my starting home position, which was 30, all the way to 45 has gained me the ability to shoot 90. If I go down to 50, I could probably get away with still clearing the rest and getting out to 100 yards. So just another added feature to the sight that will allow you to, you know, practice at long ranges. Even if you're not going to shoot them in a hunting scenario, like I said, it just helps build confidence when you're shooting long range and you go in closer as a chip shot. So I am super, super excited about this sight. It is packed with features, ones that I'm still learning about, but it's unbelievable how much technology is packed into this sight and how much of a better archer it can make you. So thank you guys for joining us here at Ground Zero with Garmin, and I hope you will check out the new A1i Pro.